Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Warbles on a lot. About to perform the delicate manoeuvre of getting into a very old hammock, which has not been used for a while. If it works, and look at that, I get to make a YouTube movie sitting in the hammock, having a beer on a rainy afternoon. It's been raining for days. It's been raining for weeks. It's pretty much been raining about since I did the demonstration of the bull roarer. Not saying that my bull roarer made it rain, but bull roarers are magic spell enhancers and they do make rain dances work better. Which is a kind of a magical thinking. It's possibly an extrapolation of a kind of magical thinking that some styles of scientists like to employ. And calls to mind a fellow called James Lovelock, an English scientist who came up with a thing he called the Gaia hypothesis. Now, the Gaia hypothesis during the 1970s suggested that all of the living species on planet Earth were cooperating in a manner which caused the temperature of planet Earth to stay stable, right? That's pretty much all the Gaia hypothesis said, was that Earth behaves as a superorganism which operates to maintain homeostasis. The particular example he gave was that because the sun has spots on the face of it, which for 3,500 years since the Chinese and the Babylonians began to observe it, these sunspots have come in cycles of every 11 years. There's a lot of them, and halfway between the peaks there are troughs where there's not many of them. When the sun gets a black spot on it, of course the black part of the sun where the spot is doesn't radiate light and heat as much as the rest of the sun. So the rest of the sun has to radiate more light and more heat to make up the difference. So when there's a lot of sunspots, the sun shines just a little bit hotter, just a little bit brighter. When there's not many sunspots, the sun shines just a little bit duller, just a little bit cooler. So Lovelock figured that there was something was causing a damping in the Earth's temperature response to the variation in the amount of sunlight. And he selected the Siberian snow daisy as the culprit. Out of the way, mosquito. The Siberian snow daisy comes in two varieties. There's a white one and there's a black one. And what Lovelock said was that when there's a lot of sunspots and the sunlight is a bit brighter and a bit hotter, the black daisies get too hot and they tend to shrivel up and die, which gives the white snow daisies a survival advantage because they don't overheat. So when there's a lot of solar sunspot activity, the white Siberian daisies overbreed and their reflective surface across the face of Siberia reflects the extra bit of sunlight back out into the sky, and therefore thus and because the planet Earth does not heat up as much as it otherwise would. Conversely, when there's not many sunspots and the sun cools down, that's when the white Siberian snow daisies don't get warm enough for their metabolic chemistry to happen as well as the black snow daisies do. So that's when the black snow daisies have a survival advantage and they outbreed the white snow daisies, and their extra black surface darkens Siberia when looked at from space, and that absorbs a little bit more heat and a little bit more light. So it's a stable dynamic instability on the Earth's temperature brought about by breeding patterns of the Siberian snow daisy, which according to Lovelock was capable of compensating for anything up to a 10 degree, I think it was, might have been a 10% change in solar radiation. It was a fairly large, pretty sure it was 10 degrees, 10 degree difference. What would otherwise be a 10 degree difference was damped out to be nearly nothing. And when Lovelock presented his ideas, it shocked the biologists and it shocked the atmospheric chemists and it shocked the physicists and it shocked everybody, and it's now, 35 years down the track, 40 years down the track, and everybody's worked out that Lovelock was not wrong. Another one of Lovelock's things that I really enjoy was when he said, in order to do world-class research, you should not need a large government budget. You shouldn't need a huge government-provided research institution. He said you should be able to do world-class research, world-leading research, on the social security payment conducted in a garden shed. So, I must admit I'm one of Lovelock's disciples in that way. One of the things that happened in the 1970s and 80s as a result of Lovelock's theory of the Gaia hypothesis was that the New Agers jumped on the bandwagon and they claimed that Gaia was the conscious awareness, the goddess of the life force of planet Earth. And this was a fair bit of crankiness among the Judeo-Christian Islamicists, descendants of the Abrahamic pre-Jewish religion, as they all reckon they know the name of God. And it caused them no end of crankiness when a bunch of New Agers were claiming scientific backing for their idea for a new name for God. But lately, we've had some pretty good evidence. Well, we've had some pretty interesting observations which may be taken as evidence for support of the Gaia hypothesis. And I speak of the 10-year drought which dried out Australia to a savage degree. And if you didn't have a tree to shade your patch of Australia, then the topsoil desiccated and the ground cover blew away. And last year we had a thing called a El-Nino, which is, you know, the Spanish word for Jesus' little sister. And whereas El-Nino causes changes in the sardine population off the coast of Chile, and therefore the rainfall patterns change over Australia, and thus and because we get a drought when the Christ child's in town in Chile and Peru. When La Nina is around, what we wind up with is wet times, very wet times. And considering that global warming is being caused by anthropogenic carbon emissions, which means we're burning too much coal and we're burning too much oil and we're pumping out way too much atmospheric carbon, and this is having a greenhouse effect on the atmosphere and it's warming the atmosphere, and none of the governments seem particularly interested to pay much attention to the physics and the chemistry of what's happening. They're all worried about politics and jobs and votes and economic growth and the fantasy that every country on the world can grow 3 to 5% bigger every year forever with a favourable balance of trade, because quite frankly that's what they've been trying to do for 3,500 years since the Babylonians invented oil lamps. The bright lights at night desynchronised their women's ovulation, and they suddenly had no control over their population growth, and they were forced to invent deficit finance to build the cities and the agricultural system to feed all the extra mouths, because they were fucking frivolously and making a mess of things. So, what our politicians are doing is giving the green light to every coal mine and every coal seam gas project and every mining project that anybody anywhere in the world can think of, and the idea is that by digging up and selling Australia as fast as possible, then we all's going to get rich. So all over inland Queensland there are open cut coal mines and coal seam gas projects, and once you expose the underground soil to the air, you get chemical reactions which mean that when it gets wet it creates a toxic slurry that's about battery acid, maybe a bit worse. And during the drought, when all of these coal mine development applications were passed, they had a big diesel electric pump which would pump the pit dry from the little bits of passing showers, and then they had an evaporation pond where the water would go back into the sky and the toxic shit would sit on the ground. Last year all of the evaporation ponds filled up during the floods, and the pits filled up. And the water's so toxic that they can't get a licence to pump it out into the Western River system, because that'll do terrible things to the ecology of the rivers, and it'll make a mess for the irrigation farmers because it's that bad. It'll literally kill everything. So they've got nowhere to pump the open cut coal mines out into. And last year all their roads and railway links to the ports got washed out. Awful lot of the breeding cattle got washed out to sea. And all the farmers who'd paid money to have laser-levelled paddocks so they could conduct enormously complicated, sophisticated broadacre agriculture, they found that their laser-levelled paddocks took their fences and went back to the ocean, and they finished up living on a floodplain, gently sloping instead. Well, we're a year down the track, and a week or a fortnight since I played with the bull roarer, and if you go that away, behind the camera, for 100 miles, you'll find that all of their road bridges are getting flooded. The low-lying areas of the Pacific Highway are out of action. They've got state emergency services rescuing people and tarpaulin their houses of all the people who want to make a motcha living on the tourist trade. If you go north from here, you'll find that the Air Force and private helicopters are rescuing people from their houses. And these are also balanced by the fact that if you go out west from here, at Moree, 2,500 people were evacuated from the low-lying areas of the township that supplies a vast hub of broadacre cotton agriculturalists. And it sort of seems to me that it's a bit embarrassing for the people who don't believe in a powerful God theory when Gaia's revenge seems to be to flood the coal mines and bust the export links so that the people who want to get $87,000 a year to sit in an air-conditioned bulldozer and dig holes in Queensland to feed the power station in Thailand or Japan, right, or the steel mills in Korea, those people are having to sit at home and wonder how to pay their mortgage as the house goes floating out to sea and the coal mine's full of water. It's like people might wish to argue that there's no conscious plan behind the response of the environment to the overpopulation of greedy, selfish, industrialised, barbarian style of humans, but it seems pretty bloody intelligent to me. If you fill up the coal mines in Queensland and you bust their rail links to the coast, then they can't burn the coal in the furnaces which would otherwise be filling up the atmosphere with soot and carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. So yeah, I think second El-Nino in a row and Gaia's revenge is going along just fine, and I don't think my little whirl and a bull roarer had much to do with it at all, because I didn't actually do a rain dance. I just swirled a bull roarer around my head and I discharged the Tampaniri Murop with a spell, Creator, please heal this land. Right? Fairly innocuous. The land seems to be healing. And I'm only getting 15 to 20 mils a day. A week. I'm not getting washed off the hill. My land's healing just fine. And isn't that amazing? I haven't sat in that hammock for about 2 years because I was scared it was going to fall off. So, warbles on a lot to YouTube regarding Gaia's revenge. Think about it. It's not as silly as it sounds. Ciao.